Selamat pagi, good morning. Welcome back to another Bali COVID-19 update. My name is Bruce and this is December 22nd, 2021. And this is the last COVID-19 update before Christmas. And so if you're celebrating Christmas, I hope you have a Merry Christmas wherever you are in the world. So this video is got the good and the bad. I'm not as pumped as I was the other day. I'm back to cautiously optimistic. Emphasis on cautiously. There's a lot of news that has just come out this morning. I don't have time to get to everything in detail. I'm adding a couple of new things here. For the rest, go to the wrap-up update, and there'll just be a very brief covering of some of the top things that are happening right now because, well, with Omicron, everything is rapidly changing. So the numbers are looking really good, and that's the optimistic part. So 7-day average for new positive cases remains at 4, so good news. And for deaths, the 7-day average 0.1. Okay, we're almost at 0. Great news. New positive cases in Indonesia, 216, and deaths 11, so some more good news. Total individuals tested in Indonesia yesterday, 225,546 with a 0.10% positive rate, and the 7-day average was 0.11. And no data on Bali testing for yesterday. What about vaccinations? Vaccinations, first dose, 3,477,806, 77.9% of the population have not reached 78% yet. And second dose, 3,084,248, 69.1% of the population. And yesterday, 5,489 additional doses. And my granddaughter got her little certificate today that showed that she had her first shot. And so, well, I'm happy. And what about yesterday in Bali? New cases 4 and deaths 0 and active cases down to 63. Yes, 63. So numbers, really, really good news. Next, what's happening in Bali for New Year's Eve? And now I've already talked about some of this, but there's been a slight change, it appears. Governor Koster bans New Year's celebration party in Bali. Restaurant closes at 10 p.m. So I've already talked about the ban on fireworks and parties and celebrations and carnivals and all of that stuff. Well, the restaurants closing at 10 o'clock, okay, and so the malls too. So the malls and the restaurants are closing at 10 o'clock. So I thought people could go out to restaurants and have a few drinks and have dinner and kind of sit there and relatively quietly celebrate New Year. But no, the operating hours for malls and restaurants will be from 9 in the morning until 10 at night, with limitations on visitors not exceeding 75% of capacity. And this comes into effect on Christmas Eve and stays until January 2nd. Plan on celebrating New Year's Eve at home. What's going on? Omicron is, well, it's the news everywhere in the world because countries are starting to lock up, to do quarantines that didn't have quarantines, to make new restrictions on holiday gatherings. In Korea, it's down to 4 now, in the Seoul area at least, for people to get together. And Thailand may get rid of the free quarantine, the no quarantine. And Indonesia may jump up to 14-day quarantine. And why is all this stuff happening? And then we've got things going on in Australia and the US and UK and France. And everybody is canceling New Year's Eve things. Why? Omicron, right? WHO sounds warnings over fast-spreading Omicron. So the Omicron variant is spreading faster than Delta variant, as you've heard from me and many other sources before, and it is causing infections in people who have already been fully vaccinated or who've already recovered from the disease. Okay, then so these breakthrough cases, according to the WHO's chief scientist, numbers going up, all health systems are going to be under strain. And that's the problem that we have to worry about in Indonesia, is what happens if numbers shoot up again. Remember what things were like when we were at 56,000 a day in Indonesia? They were not good. And the variant is successfully evading some immune responses, according to the chief, meaning that booster programs being rolled out in many countries ought to be targeted towards people with weaker immune systems. And according to the WHO Director General, there is now consistent evidence that Omicron is spreading significantly faster than Delta variant. And the Director General said, it's more likely people vaccinated and recover from COVID-19 could be infected or reinfected. Okay, so not good news. And research continues to be done on the Omicron variant, and we're just going to have to see how that works out. So according to the Director General of the WHO, holiday festivities should be canceled in many places because an event canceled is better than a life canceled, he said. And increased cases overwhelm health systems and more deaths. But the WHO team offered some hope to a weary world facing the new wave that 2022 would be the year that the pandemic, which has already killed more than 5.6 million people worldwide, would end. And the WHO team pointed to the development of second and third generation vaccines and further development of antimicrobial treatments and other innovations. According to Mike Ryan, who's the WHO's top emergency expert, we hope to consign this disease to a relatively mild disease that is easily prevented, that is easily treated. Okay, bad news for some, good news for others about the quarantine in Indonesia. Omicron. Government mulls to increase quarantine period to 14 days. Yes, that's right. And it is in response to the Omicron variant, which is in Indonesia, and the government is worried about it spreading. So they're looking at 14 days. Why are they looking at it? Because of Omicron? Well, because people came in, they got tested, they were okay, they went into quarantine, they got tested again in quarantine, and bang, they had it. And so the government is saying, we don't want to let people out too early. So Pak Luhut said in a press conference on Monday, as usual, that he is encouraging the public not to travel overseas. So Pak Luhut said, like many others in the government had said, please do not travel overseas unless it's absolutely necessary because of the possibility of bringing in Omicron, which is, well, it's already here. But they don't want any more incoming cases. So are we going to go up to 14-day quarantine? I would not doubt it. And there'll be meetings later in the week. And so by Sunday's update, well, we'll know for sure. And what about quarantine, right? So everybody's got to do quarantine. There's a 10-day quarantine. Everybody's complaining. And now it's possible there's going to be a 14-day quarantine. This is an interesting article. Methods used to dodge travel quarantine, from special letters to bribery. And who is this about? Mostly about the special people in Indonesia. So the latest in-depth report from Tempo magazine looks at 3 methods committed by state officials and public figures in working around the mandatory quarantine. Okay, so you have to be a special person to do this. Tempo found 3 MOs, 3 modus operandi, and they consisted of specific memos from the COVID-19 task force, escaping quarantine facilities through bribery, and hiring a quarantine jockey. I'm not sure what a quarantine jockey is. So first the memo. So Tempo discovers this letter dated October 10th, 2021, signed by the National Disaster Mitigation Agency. So it listed 16 House of Representative ministers, their entourage, who visited Turkey and came into Jakarta and didn't want to do the quarantine. And so this memo recommended easing the quarantine for these poor people. And according to the article, it blatantly recommends the men who had just traveled overseas to self-quarantine as they arrived in Indonesia. Self-quarantine, which means quarantine at home, which is not what people are supposed to do unless you're special. So the government here, if you've been following or if you are from the UK, of course you know what's happening with Prime Minister Johnson and, well, special rules for special people. Not just Indonesia, it's everywhere. So most of the men did not comment for publication, but one said, we were able to self-quarantine after taking PCR swab tests. Because sure, it's okay, because we're special, and so we should get special treatment. And the memo had mentioned that self-quarantine recommendation adheres to the circular issued by the head of the COVID-19 Task Force, number 18/2021, along with 2 addendums. However, none of the 3 circulars mentioned self-quarantine recommendations for parliament members nor state officials. However, that was later changed. The quarantine protocol dispensation emerged in public after DPR member Radin Wulandari, who's popularly known by her stage name as a singer, Mulan Jamila, allegedly visited a mall in South Jakarta even though she was supposed to be on 10-day quarantine after arriving from Turkey. However, her lawyer, Ali Lubis, denies that his client violated quarantine rules. Okay, so after the special treatment for public officials gathered some attention from the public and some protests, the COVID-19 Task Force on Tuesday, December 14th, issued circular number 25/2021 on health protocols for international travel amidst the COVID-19 pandemic, which gave a clear explanation of the special treatment for officials at the echelon 1 and above who returned from traveling overseas. And of course, this was met with criticism from a number of epidemiologists who said that the rule is discriminatory. So not only are state officials subjected to the health quarantine evasion fiasco, 2 other officials, along with a hotel entrepreneur, revealed that shady deals to evade quarantine often happen between international travelers and airport officials under a certain amount of tariff. And we put the air quotes around tariff, I think. Any specifics on that? Well, Tempo's investigation visited the Tangerang District Court official website and found that at least 23 people were found of guilty of violating quarantine rules. 11 of them were people who traveled from abroad, while the rest were accomplices. And the first case of quarantine evasion was handled by the police in April, where 7 passengers of a chartered aircraft from India, with 1 Indian national, had bribed 2 airport officials claiming to be from the Jakarta Tourism Agency as they landed at Soekarno-Hatta Airport. And the latest case attracted public attention involved a local social media popularity, Rachel Vinya Roland. Okay, I have no idea who she is. Okay, so comments? If you are familiar at all with Indonesia, you know the ITE laws here and how that can negatively impact some people. So I like to sometimes just leave my comments silent. An epidemiologist from the University of Indonesia, Pandu Riono, said that evasive attempts prove that many people underestimate the virus and do not understand the purpose of the quarantine. And what is that? The purpose of the quarantine is to keep COVID cases from coming into the country. Vaccines and vaccinations. Interesting one here. This is from what I was going to talk about on Sunday, but there was so much stuff on Sunday. Indonesia to sanction provinces with low vaccination rates. So the Home Affairs Minister, Tito Karnavian, said that he's going to impose sanctions against provinces with COVID-19 vaccination rates below 70%. And that's by the end of 2021. So provinces that are below 70% have, what's today, the 22nd? They've got 9 days to get the numbers to 70. And what will happen? Provinces that fail to reach the target will be warned verbally and given a disincentive as sanctions. They will not get additional incentive funds. Okay, so they're not going to get any money if they don't reach the target. On the other hand, the good provinces who succeed in reaching the vaccination target rate will be proposed to the Ministry of Finance for additional regional incentive funds and general allocation funds. Okay, so that's us here. We're way over 70%. Well, according to the government figures. And one of the provinces that's below the vaccination rate of 70% is West Sumatra. And the Minister Tito, visited them last Friday to find out what the problem is. How come you can't get to 70%? And a number of Regency heads spoke with the minister, and the deputy regent of Agam said that in addition to the Regency's high population and vast area, the lack of vaccinators is slowing down the vaccine rollout. Okay, vaccinators, people who are giving you the shot. And you remember in a earlier segment, not earlier now, but a previous segment, let's say, I was talking about the areas outside of the Java Bali hub here and how they're going to do that. And they were talking about using the police and the military and local doctors and anybody else that they could get in there to be vaccinators. But apparently not enough people there. And Padang Pariaman Regent said that many residents are still in denial about the existence of COVID-19. And the regent said, every day the regional government and the police and army continue to push vaccinations. Their number is at 49.2%. He said there's no shortage of doses. We also have issued circulars to speed up vaccinations. However, when we come to see them, the residents were out at sea or planting. That's one of our obstacles. Those could be valid reasons. Maybe everybody is out working, or it could be an excuse, no telling. And how did the minister respond to this? He responded by saying there's strategies that local governments can do. One of them is by sending health workers from the central area, Java, Bali, to areas that need vaccinators. And regarding people who are unwilling to be vaccinated, Minister Tito said that regional heads must take a sociological approach to convince them to be protected against COVID-19. Okay, I'm not sure what a sociological approach is. So as I said the other day, vaccinations for kids starting, and my granddaughter got vaccinated today. And here is a story about Surabaya. Surabaya ensures adequate vaccine stocks for children aged 6 to 11 years old. By God's will, the stock is safe. During the 2 days of child vaccination, there were no reports of post-immunization accidents from the Surabaya Health Service. The head of Public Relations Division of the Surabaya City Government, Febriadita Prajatara, said the other day. And they're calling it post-immunization accidents. And the other day, there was a different term that they were using. I forget what it is. Ibu Prajatara said that in an event of a report on KIPI, K-I-P-I, the school, along with the local health center, would take immediate action. And it is pouring, but I've started this and I'm hoping that having the lavalier will make the sound okay. So after the kids are vaccinated, they have to hang around and they're observed for symptoms, and if there are no symptoms, they're sent home. And that's exactly the same thing that happened with my granddaughter today. She got her shot. She said she went to the classroom. She was one of the last ones to get vaccinated. Her friends went earlier, and she said, I waited for a while, and then they checked me and said, okay, you can go home. And so far she's been playing. Well, she came up and wrote a book in my room today, and then she's been out playing with her friends all day. And I'm surprised they're not out Mandi Hujan right now. During the 2 days of vaccination, several factors hindered the implementation of the first dose. And this included children who had received immunization and could not get the COVID-19 vaccine, had received immunization for something else. Those who were in poor health, such as suffering cough and fever, and parents with a busy schedule who could not take their children to get vaccinated. And here we were told that if Zoe couldn't make it to school today to get vaccinated, she was going to have to go to the Puskesmas, the public health center, to get vaccinated. And well, it's so crowded over there, so we made sure that my wife took her today, not me, my wife. But in Surabaya, rescheduling will be done for children that are unable to take the vaccinations. And the scheduling will be arranged by each school, accompanied by local health care on duty. And it is pouring. If you were here, well, I think you've gotten used to the rain by now. And if you're not here, but you've missed Bali, well, this is par for the course during this time of the year, during the rainy season. And as of December 15th, some 18,668 doses were administered, some 72% of the targeted 25,000. And on the second day, December 16th, the target was 20,000 doses, but they only were able to achieve 13,788, or 67% of the target. Based on general data for Surabaya, 118% of the first dose has been successfully injected, and second dose is 100%. Now, of course, that's not 100%, 18% of the total population. That's 118% of the target population. According to this article, that means that Surabaya residents are particular about their health especially for forming herd immunity to suppress the curve of COVID-19. And what about President Jokowi's request that everybody stay in the country and not go out in order to keep from getting the Omicron, especially the Omicron variant, and bringing it back into the country? Because, well, what about Umrah? Religious Affairs Ministry postpones the Umrah departure until early 2022. So this is related to President Jokowi's request for Indonesians not to travel abroad. The Director General of Hajj and Umrah at the Religious Affairs Ministry, Hilman Latif, noted that this decision was taken after meeting with the Association for Umrah Travel Organizations, PPIU. According to the Director General, we prioritize protecting Umrah pilgrims in the midst of COVID-19 pandemic, especially after the new variant called Omicron emerged. Latif said that PPIU supported the government's decision to postpone Umrah, but that, well, they had a sense of disappointment arising to having Umrah delayed for a long time, and people were really excited about going. But according to the article, everybody understands this pandemic and special measures are called for. Pak Latif said that the implementation of Umrah during the pandemic is a pilot for the implementation of the Hajj pilgrimage in 1443 or 2022, depending on which calendar you use. Of course, he said, this postponement is a bitter decision. However, this is being done for common good. We are optimistic that all parties would understand and hopefully lessons would be learned from this decision. And so if you were planning, or any of your relatives are planning on doing Umrah, you're gonna have to wait until next year, I'm afraid. And the weather just suddenly, okay, the rains came, wow. And you know, I spent 2 hours this morning cleaning the balcony and getting rid of all the water collector from last night's rain. And now it is full again. Never ends, never ends. And so we know that we have our tourism woes and we don't have anybody here, and some Southeast Asian tourist destinations have already opened. But according to this article, some Southeast Asian tourism spots reopened, but arrivals are still down. And according to Mr. Stuart McDonald, and I mentioned him a long time ago in a different video talking about travel. He's the founder or co-founder of travelfish.org, a guide to Southeast Asia, which I've never seen. He said, for all but the most determined, it's a pretty convoluted process to plan a short holiday, and ain't that the truth? And he apparently lives in Bali, and he said there'll be determined people who figure it out, but for anything at scale, we've got to wait a while. Okay, well, that's true. And so far this year, there was an article last week in the press about just 45 people have come in under the, but so far, there was an article last week about 45 people. I didn't even bother reading it. 45 people, who cares? Who came in here. Apparently they arrived at sea at Banoa. And, well, I don't know. According to Miss Dayu Inda, the head of marketing division of the island's official tourism office, she said, I don't know where they come from, whether they're tourists or expats. I have no details. And in Malaysia, only a few hundred foreign tourists have visited the resort island of Langkawi since the government partially reopened it to visitors this fall. Far fewer than the thousands that were expected. In Thailand, there's been over 100,000 foreign visitors that arrived in November as part of the quarantine-free entry program. But the country's total arrival figure for the year, less than 270,000, is nowhere near 40 million who came in 2019. Of course, we know that. And in Vietnam, foreign tourists began trickling in by the dozens under a pilot program in November. But compared to 2019, when they had 1.8 million international arrivals, nowhere near. International tourism is slow. Even if you open up, not many people are coming. One of the problems is China. Chinese make up a large part of the visitors to Southeast Asia. And, well, they're not going anywhere. And another problem is the lack of direct flights. Cambodia, for example, reopened for international travelers last month, waived quarantine For those who are fully vaccinated, submit to testing. But most travelers from outside Asia who want to visit Cambodia need to transit through aviation hubs elsewhere in the region, such as Malaysia, and that means additional COVID-19 screenings, which is a pain in the butt. And so back to Mr. McDonald, he said, it's just too complicated. You get stuck in quarantine and you test positive. Who wants to have a holiday like that? Exactly. And so back to Miss Inda, and Miss Inda said the focus is now on domestic tourism. And well, I've been talking about that for quite a while now. And we've got them coming in here, as you heard in a previous segment. I don't know where I'm going to put this. Is it going to be before this or after this? Somewhere. You've heard in a different segment. There's a different segment talking about domestic tourism in Santiago Uno. Okay, and so yeah, the focus is on domestic tourists right now. This is the third time I've done a story on Thailand, and each time I've deleted it because the information keeps changing. And this just happened this morning. I saw this quarantine back for travelers. So the government has decided to temporarily suspend the entry of both Thais and foreign arrivals under the Test and Go scheme and restore mandatory quarantine in an attempt to keep Omicron at bay. And so the test and go was you came in, you got tested, you waited around, and then you could go anywhere. Okay, that has been temporarily suspended. However, if you already have been approved, according to this article, you can come in and you can still use the test and go. They are not accepting any new applications at the moment. That is the big thing. However, the Phuket Sandbox is still open, so you can apply to the Phuket Sandbox. And this change is going to be in effect until January 4th, and then there'll be a reevaluation. New arrivals who are coming in not under the Test and Go program will undergo PCR testing and be quarantined for between 7 and 10 days, depending on where they're going. Okay, I'm not sure quite how that works. The Prime Minister said that about 200,000 visitors had applied for entry through the Test and Go program, and about 110,000 of them have already arrived in Thailand. The other 90,000 are waiting for approval, and that is not going to happen until January 4th or later. And the health authorities have notified the Prime Minister that they are ready to deal with any increase in Omicron patients due to arrivals through the Test and Go program. So, not good news for people wanting to go to Thailand, but if you're there or you've already been approved, New Year's Eve festivities are okay. They are going to be allowed to take place. So, good news for partiers. And similar to Indonesia, the Thai authorities have asked citizens to not go on international trips, particularly to Europe, US, Africa, and the Middle East. Okay, that's just about everywhere in the world except for Asia. The Deputy Prime Minister said that there are currently more than 60 cases of Omicron in Thailand and another 97 pending confirmation. So, increasing relatively quickly in Thailand. And what about Bali and the holiday season? Minister asked Bali to prepare for increase in travelers. So yes, our old friend Santiago Uno, the Minister of Tourism and Creative Economy, has said Bali should get ready for an increase in domestic tourists. Good. He said, based on the data we get, about 30,000 domestic tourists come to Bali per day. Yes, it's 30,000, it's not 20,000. Okay, so any number other than 20,000 is cool. So starting this week, travelers using air transportation will be around 15 to 20,000, and ones from land could go up to 15,000, he said. Okay, so land coming in from Gili Manuk, coming in from Padang Bai, and I did a segment, last video, right, on tightening up the borders, especially in Gili Manuk. And the minister said that his administration is continuously coordinating with Bali's governor and heads of regional districts to anticipate the spread of COVID-19 through several measures. Ngurah Rai Airport has been ordered to strengthen their screening, as has Gili Manuk and Padang Bai. And Pak Uno added, additionally, it is now mandatory for vacationers to use the PL app in other health facilities. Is anybody using the PL app? If you're coming in, or if you've just come in, has anybody checked on the PL app for you? Okay, today I went to another shopping center, kind of like a, well, it's not, I wouldn't call it a mall, just a shopping center. I forget what the name of it is now. It used to be Hardee's and now it's something else. And nobody's checking anything. They did like check our temperature when we went in. They scanned Zoe's hand and they scanned mine, and everybody there was wearing masks and I was wearing masks. Shoppers, there were 3 in addition to us. Nobody was shopping there today. Paco Uno said, I appeal to the public to do things during Christmas and New Year's with full responsibility. Do activities with strict discipline, make sure there are no crowds, make sure the PL app is integrated, and let's ensure that the moment of Christmas and New Year's does not trigger new COVID-19 cases. Okay, we all hope that. And so let's hope that the screening here works. Now, if Omicron is already being transmitted locally, it's likely that we will get cases here. But so far, so good. We have not seen the cases go up. We're still stable, and so that is good news. Time for a wrap-up update. And first thing on it is people who travel abroad for leisure must pay quarantine fees in the hotel. So the government, according to Pak Luhut, so the government is saying that if you're out of the country on fun and you come back, you do not get to use free quarantine facilities or get to go home, unless, of course, you are a special person. You have to go to the hotel and pay for it yourself. Why is that important? Because there's about 4,000 people a day coming into Indonesia right now, internationally. The numbers have been going up. And the government is preparing 3 more quarantine sites as international travel has increased. And so there'll be 3 more places because, well, there's just not enough places right now to stick everybody. So there should be enough places soon to quarantine everybody that is coming in. And it's currently at 10 days, but the government is considering 14, and that could change anytime. And another update here on Thailand, 25 Thais from a tour group have Omicron. So they came back from doing Umrah in Saudi, and 25 of the 31 Thais who returned tested positive for Omicron. And what is Indonesia doing about the Omicron cases? 3 Omicron cases in Indonesia with traces to 250 close contacts, 10 infections. So the Indonesian Health Ministry is tracing the contacts of 3 COVID cases, the 3 Omicron cases that they have, and they've come up with 250 close contacts, and out of those 250 close contacts, they found 10 that tested positive for COVID-19, and the ministry is currently conducting genome sequencing to find out whether they have the Omicron variant. And 3 new countries added to the banned list in Indonesia. UK, Denmark, and Norway are now banned from coming into Indonesia. And some good news. The tourism industry players in Bali have finally decided to cancel their march, so no demo from people in the tourism industry. The meeting that I talked about in, I think it was the last video, seems to have worked, and so the demos are called off. And so we're going to have domestic peace here at the start of the new year. And that is all the updates. So what do things look like? Okay, the numbers look good. Vaccinations are ongoing. Omicron cases are small still, but the government is playing it close to the vest. There's no news on the 14-day quarantine yet, but as I said before, that can change instantly. Domestic tourists are coming into Bali, and there was a headline that I saw, and it just kind of disappeared. I clicked off it, and I forgot where I saw it, that the deputy governor of Bali is asking the central government for an increase in flights to Bali during this holiday season. I don't know if that's going to happen, but people are coming, and that's good news right now. There's going to be a lot of monitoring going on around the country, especially in Java, in Jakarta, and in Bali, to make sure that people do not come out and gather for Christmas or New Year, especially New Year's Eve celebration. And with the closure of the restaurants at 10 o'clock, well, that means that you can't go out and sit and have a Happy New Year at midnight, but you could go and stay until 10 o'clock and have fun. And with the lack of tourists here, it should be very easy to find restaurants under 75% capacity, unless you want a really, really popular one. So I'm cautiously optimistic. Cautiously optimistic because Omicron is in Indonesia, and as we see from Thailand and everywhere else in the world, it can spread rapidly. And so we don't know yet exactly what the severity is. It's clear that it's highly transmissible. In terms of severity, not clear yet. But the WHO says to beware, and it seems that governments are taking that advice. And so it's going to be harder to travel for a while until Omicron is figured out. Is this a good time to come to Indonesia? Yeah, I'd say no, it's not. If you really need to come here, okay. Once you go through the 10-day quarantine and you get to Bali, things are normal here. Normal in that you can go wherever you want, you can do whatever you want, basically. Not for New Year's Eve, but after the 2nd, things will go back to normal, or hopefully they'll go back to normal, depending on what happens with Omicron. If you can deal with the 10-day quarantine, or which may be 14-day quarantine coming up, okay. But 14-day quarantine is gonna be expensive. 10-day quarantine is expensive. And so I think that's going to put a kibosh on people coming in, but we'll just have to see. So let's wrap this up. I've got a lot of other things going on right now today. If you found this helpful, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. And if you want to come to Bali, but the quarantine is too long for you, hang in there. It will be reduced eventually. If you are here, well, I hope you're enjoying the sometimes sunny weather and you're not having floods wherever you are. Be kind to someone today. Stay safe. Thanks for viewing, and I'll see you on Sunday.